Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone. Another edition of earthnouveau.com. This week we'd like to have a chat about trauma and the outcomes of trauma. I mean, a lot of us who are doing the inner healing and healing for others, those who have clients will recognise a lot of what we're going to talk about, I'm sure. I think it's a pretty appropriate time because if you're paying attention to what's happening in our celestial skies at the moment, you'll know that Mars is retrograde and that is throwing up a lot of stuff for people. But I just like to say here and now that I think, I haven't listened to what Martina and Andrew were saying last night, but for me, this whole thing of Mars, and I read Astro Butterfly, she's really worth reading, is all opportunity. Everything that is going on that is potentially negative, and including the trauma that's coming up for people, whether it's in anger or any other form, is all an opportunity for growth. It's all an opportunity for awakening. So I haven't done a lot of work on trauma. Mary has, because Mary's a psychotherapist. So the only work I have done on trauma is through my CST work, my craniosacral therapy, and with my clients and my shamanic work. So I have noticed what's been coming up in people just recently. So I'm happy to sort of talk about my experience of it. And Mary has the real nuts and bolts and the theory of it, not just trauma. Sure. We all know, you do. We all know what trauma is, but I mean, we know it's lack of self-love, lack of feeling safe, and we know that in extreme cases it can result in the complete collapse of the nervous system, and that we can approach that in a very multidimensional way, and a shamanic way is how I would approach that, because if you're getting a complete collapse of the energetic system, then you're going to be open to entities and all sorts of other things coming in. You're not grounded, you're not present, and so on. So we all know trauma is huge. There's a scale, I know, but it's a huge topic. I can't think of anyone who hasn't had some trauma in their life, and now is the time for it to come up and for us to look at it, look at what happens when we have trauma, when the body holds on to it and we don't release it. So if you guys are happy with having a look at that today and the various topics under that, we'll go ahead. Mary.
Yes, Laura. I'm going to give a definition of trauma just to start with, as is in the dictionary. Psychological trauma is damage to the mind that occurs as a result of a distressing event. Trauma is often the result of an overwhelming amount of stress that exceeds one's ability to cope or integrate the emotion involved with the experience. So that's the definition. And as I was looking over my notes on it, really, it's just, you know, it was difficult to decide kind of, I suppose, what to focus on. So I'm really going to depend on ye and what ye would like to ask about it. But I was looking at, we all know what the big traumas are, and we can all kind of identify with that. You know, we know if something huge happens in our lives, we've suffered trauma as a result. And it's kind of expected that we would. But really, when I was looking over things, I was realizing and remembering that actually there's trauma underlying in everybody's life that is unseen, unspoken, and unheard. And that's really what we're operating out of. And it begins, I'm not looking at the major traumas, I'm just looking at the ordinary relationship attachment traumas. And it did go back to the attachments in early childhood. And, you know, if the child felt traumatized about something, or if the child felt fearful, because they're not traumatized at just being fearful or having a need about something. And if the parent isn't available, which we all weren't, like, let's face it, we all weren't at different times. the child has no place to go with that. So that can be internalized as a traumatic experience, albeit a mild one. But what happens is, with the repetition of that, the traumatic experiences can build up. And the trauma is, if when the child can't verbalize it because there isn't a holding space for them to do so, it's just internalized in the body. And usually it's stored someplace in the body that has the least light, but it is also to do with the lineage and the genetics. And you'll often find that in certain families, you know, certain ailments might run in the family, like problems with colon, problems with liver, problems with stomach. It is where that lineage is storing it, and it has created a weakness along that line. And you'll find then that the child will automatically store it in the same place, because it is the place where you don't have as much light as the other organs. So it can get stored there. And as the child develops, and as maybe they experience more trauma in their lives in different ways, it will trigger the earlier traumas that were unresolved. So now you have got a cumulative effect. And sometimes it looks like the response is out of proportion to what happens. And you'll often see that, you know, you think that was a bit over the top, but actually it's because of the fact that there has been an accumulation of minor traumas that have taken place that haven't been resolved or talked about. And anyway, that's just the basis of trauma. I'm going to stop talking and see what you want to talk about, and you can ask me any questions. Not that I have the answers. I'm not here as an expert, and I don't have all the nuts and bolts, but I will try to answer your questions as you know, see fit.
Can I just chip in there, Mary? Because in the beginning, your definition you had said it was something in the mind, and then you went on to say about it being in the body.
Yeah.
And my experience very much with my clients is that it is a body-held thing.
Absolutely.
Energetically held in the neural pathways. And I know some people go and get hypnotherapy and other treatments for this. So for me, in CST work, as Ditina will probably say as well, we do a lot of trauma release through working on the body, because as you said later, I think it can manifest in various places on the body.
It will. It's usually initially, I think the reason that they said the mind there, and I actually found myself when I read it, I thought, well, that's not kind of totally true, because initially it is a mind response, but it's actually processed in the body or stored in the body. But the amygdala in the brain is responsible for the processing of fear, arousal, and emotional stimuli. So it's that area of the brain that actually works with the nervous system to store it, just to give you the physicality of it. That's what happens. Yeah. And then the neurons are the neurons that we have in our body and our nervous system, where they translate messages from the brain. The neurons do it they're like little wires with little kind of pieces at the end of them that looks like a tree, actually. So it runs up, the message runs up that little neuron and it jumps to the next one. So what happens is, just when people get aroused with traumatic kind of stress, you know, that's how it gets transmitted throughout the body. But what happens is, when people are under a lot of traumatic stress and it isn't ever kind of dealt with, as in it's not talked about, it can turn into PTSD, but the transmitters don't know when to stop transmitting. So the person now goes into hypervigilance, and they're always looking out for something. And you'll often see that in people, and you're really talking about PTSD when it goes to that. You know, they can't take anything by chance. They're the whole time on the guard. They're the whole time watching, hypervigilant. And that's where the neurotransmitters, this is just to give you the physicality of it. And cortisol is one of the hormones that works with that, because that manages our stress release hormone and how we deal with that. So that's constantly being pumped as well into the system. So people with severe trauma and kind of on the borderlines of PTSD can present like that to you, you know, that they're in no way relaxed, and they kind of, you can go into either hyper activity, or hypo, which is where they kind of seem like they have no energy, very, very much kind of lack of energy, just kind of sitting there, not saying an awful lot. And the whole idea in the work with trauma is to try to find what's known as the window of tolerance between those two. And the more that we can, that's where the person feels safe, and where they feel, that's the holding that I was talking about in the early attachment that was missing. And if that holding can be provided, which provides that window of tolerance, the person is able to feel safe enough to explore what it is that's in the memory, because they don't always know. They might get flashes, but they don't actually know. So it encourages them to go back and to tell their story. And in the telling of that, and in the holding of that, there is a healing which expands the window of tolerance. So there's less hyper and there's less hypo. And they begin to become happier in that space. And they begin to re-inhabit that space, really, for the first time. But stop me, because I'll just keep talking. So just ask me something else, or let anybody else that has anything to bring in.
I do, actually. I do,
Okay.
Mary, thank you so much. Very well said. It actually reminded me of something that might other, you know, I'm an expert in this because I have actually experienced this.
Okay.
Very from here to here, from low. I experienced trauma myself at every level. Like at some point, I was afraid to leave the house.
Right. Okay.
But what I wanted to say to you is, you know, when the mind and the body communicates. So I was like, in this tremor that I almost gave up my life. So for me, what helped me is like I had this little piece of lifeline probably that I actually took homeopathy. I'm sure people know here what it is.
Yes.
And that has kind of signaled my body that there is life.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So it was interesting what you said, because sometimes we go into that state. I went to that state that I felt I have lost everything. So
Yes.
there was no life. I can't really explain, but there was no life in me.
I understand
it's gone.
that. Yes. Yes.
And I went so far that, well, I didn't do what I didn't, but I totally have given up. So there's no life. And like, you know, the mind was telling the body, and I put a lot of stuff in my gut, in my colon, in my, so, you know, the cortisol and everything and all that. So I went into very deep trauma, very deep depression, or you know, very, very
Yes.
deep.
Yes.
All the way down. And that's when I did the homeopathy. In my case, I didn't speak to anybody. I didn't want to speak to anybody.
Yeah.
Some people might do. But
speaking is difficult, I think, at that time,
yes.
Andrea. It's very difficult to speak at that time. So the homeopathic remedy or whatever works is fantastic.
I mean, that saved my life, hands
Absolutely.
down. And it started to slowly bring me back into life.
Yes.
Slowly, you know,
Yes.
very slowly. And that's when I started everything.
Yes. It's a slow recovery. It's a slow road back.
And
For
I think,
somebody who has a lot of trauma. Sorry, Laura. Thanks,
sorry.
Andrea.
Yeah, just jumping on the back of what Andrea was saying, I've had exactly the same thing. And for me, Andrea, that was entity invasion, quite honestly, because my whole energetic field was hugely polluted from whatever, visits to hospital, you know, all the dirty spiritual places, wearing myself out, everything you've just described. Yes, I've been through too. I'm sure many people have. And what happens there is entities come in. Yes. And they do start to abuse. And that's where the craniosacral work and the shamanic work can really step in and fill some of the void that the you know, the pharmaceutical and the doctor industry, exactly, that they don't really understand why. And when you describe that emptiness and the wanting to give up your life and that my friend hugged me and said, there's nothing of you, you're not in your body, because your soul's had enough of the pollution around you, the energetic pollution.
You think that's why?
And really it's the shamanic work and, you know, all everything we know about spiritual hygiene, but really heavy shamanic work that will get rid of that.
For me, that was back in 2005. That my mother, you know, committed suicide. That was the tragedy that put me to that. But what happened is, which is what I wanted to tell Mary, is like when I received a phone call from my brother, it felt like a lightning. So which is, you know, Mary, you were saying that something goes into your body or something happens in the body. We just wanted to ask you the question about that. It felt like it was lightning. And my life stopped. Like I died, you know.
Yeah, I know.
I can remember this clearly. You know, of course I'm okay now, but you know, it's like.
Yes. And sometimes actually what works with that, because there's a kind of a tension around where that's held in the body, and a person usually will avoid it. Because they unconsciously know that there's something there that they don't want to touch. But what works really well with that is if you actually just do squeezing exercises in different parts of your body, if you pay attention to different parts. Now, you mightn't know where it is, but if you do, all the better. But if you don't, even squeezing the limbs, the legs, the muscles, you know, the shoulders, that kind of thing, squeezing, letting go, squeezing, letting go. In that act, you're making contact with what's buried. And it can often give a voice. You might be able to give a voice to it, you may not, but there's a release each time, that the breath releases it each time, even though the mind doesn't need to know what's being released. Yeah.
I mean, I did a lot of work, obviously, you know, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, but it's good to know for other people because they might experience this, like Laura said, like you just nothing. You just feel like, wow, what happened? It's just nothing.
Yes,
you know?
yes. I see a question there from somebody asking about the dissociative states. And usually one of the huge ones that presents itself is not being able to remember. They have huge problems with memory, people who are very traumatized, and lists really become their lives. And they don't know why. They can't focus. They lack concentration, they lack focus. They have to write everything down. They have to make lists. They can either be, as I said before, hyper or hypo, kind of vigilant, talking an awful lot or not talking at all. They're usually playing around that place of trying to find the window of tolerance, trying to find the safe ground, trying to find the regulation. And that's what their lives become about unconsciously. They think about that a lot. You know, they're assessing situations a lot to see where they're safe, where they're not, where it's safe to talk, where it's not. So that affects really all of their lives. It kind of permeates through everything in the way that we, and actually I'm saying they, but I really mean us, because we all would have certain levels of it. And I was going to ask Martina if she could just talk about, because I know you can do this off the top of your head, Martina, about the vagus nerve and the programming that can take place and does take place, because the vagus nerve is huge in trauma.
Yeah, I mean, those dissociative states, as you just said, all this withdrawal and everything, this is obviously where, you know, also addiction comes in, and where distraction comes in, and being a socialite, a false sense of, you know, I'm happy, that type of stuff, obsession, all of that. Now, vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the big motor, really.
Yeah.
Really, you know, runs the sympathetic, the parasympathetic, and, you know, as we always say, it's that super highway, you know. And we were talking yesterday about certain construction sites, you know, that we are putting ourselves into, that we're creating ourselves in order to further our development, and trauma is part of that. Is of that, and it comes through the programming, and it comes through the conditioning and everything. And the one thing, it's like, okay, so talking more about the vagus nerve, is every negative thought that we have kicks out the vagus nerve out of balance. And this is why, you know, that exercise that we've talked about before is really so good to do on a daily basis, you know, by taking your hands behind and then using the eyes to the left and to the right to just come back into balance. But vagus nerve is connected to the sympathetic, to the parasympathetic, and it's all part of that. If there's any specific question there is about the vagus nerve, because it is that biggest nerve that starts from the back of the occiput there and goes all the way along the spine, all the way down to the bladder, you know. Yes. And as we have those cells that are being inflicted by these traumatic experiences, it affects the vagus nerve, and then the vagus nerve throws out the organs and everything, because it is that connector.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, can I ask you a question that's sort of puzzling me?
Right.
So when you do counselling, when one does counselling for the traumatic experience, and you're asking the client to repeat, to go over what is happening to them, what has happened to them and happening, is that a good way of doing it? Because aren't we just confirming and reusing and putting more energy into the old neural pathways? Should we be not doing that and recalibrating the neural pathways, or creating new neural pathways? Because counselling is a repetitive thing, isn't it? They have to go over old traumas.
Well, it's more an exploratory thing. Like, the whole purpose of counselling is to explore and to reflect. And you did say something there about, was it a good way to do it or was it not? And I think that the danger with anything, especially the counselling, is that you could re-traumatize, and that's the one thing that has to be avoided. You know, in the telling of the event, you have to really watch that the person isn't being re-traumatized. So that's why the work with it is really slow, because you're always looking at that window of tolerance for the client. You're always assessing, are they okay in that? And you do that by providing a holding space, which is as safe as possible, and you check in with the person if they feel safe. How are they feeling? And sometimes the person will go into the memory without really knowing that they're talking about something that has traumatized them. They just start to talk about something that has happened that they didn't talk about or felt they couldn't before. And they're doing it now because there's a space that feels safe for them to explore it. But I think in any work with trauma, you do have to be careful that they're not re-traumatized in the telling or the experiencing again of the event that caused the trauma in the first place.
Yes, you don't want to be reinvesting into the past traumas, do you?
No, no.
So,
and it is about creating new neural pathways. It's about the client discovering new resources that they didn't know were there because they couldn't see them, because they were so obsessed with just maintaining vigilance and surviving, really, that they actually couldn't see that there was other resources available to them, or they're not really that available to people, you know, that they would actually confide in people that much, because there's this unconscious avoidance. And in the process of them telling their story, and the counsellor and the healer, I should say, because the healer can do this just like a counsellor, it is about finding new ways and new avenues of resources that they actually have at their disposal, that they can use to help them restructure their life so that they can actually cope better with those traumas and those memories that are actually limiting them in the here and now.
It feels very much like mind work. And of course, I like to work like a lot of people do with the body holding the trauma and releasing it from the body, because we all muscle has memory and so on. And, you know, somebody who's seen something horrific is going to pull a face, you know, a face of shock. And we learn in CST to help release that from the facial muscles, which talking alone, you know, I'm not knocking counselling, I'm just saying talking alone, we need to go beyond the old.
Yes, I hear you. And I actually agree with you. That's why I think that the physical body work is good to incorporate with the counselling, like the physical exercises of the squeezing and the releasing and the breathing and all of that. And of course, it's by no means the only way, and certainly not the best way to deal with it. But sometimes the client will pick the modality that they like best, or that might suit them best. And sometimes for different people, it suits them better actually to talk, because they may have got self-muted in all that process when they were young and they couldn't talk. And the healing for them might be in the talking. Like I do reflexology, and I've seen people releasing trauma without a word ever been spoken. It may be there in their feet and different reflexes, and they may release it through the breath and the body, through the sweating and whatever. And they may go into a healing crisis afterwards. And it may not ever really be discussed, but at the same time released. But again, it's whatever the person is drawn to. I think that they're drawn to whatever it is they feel they need most.
I agree with you, Mary, totally, because something came up for me this week. I'm going to tell you, and I agree with Laura, because I do with alchemy the same, what Laura does with her thing. I think it's, and I agree with you, Mary. I'm going to tell you something that all my life, people start to try to tell me to not to speak, to not to say anything. Because I always wanted to express, you know, I'm following my awareness, and nobody wanted to see awareness, nobody wanted to hear it, nobody wanted to hear the truth, if you will, you know. A lot of people even now, they try to silence me because I am here where I am. But it came up this week why people try to silence me or be jealous of me or be irony. I mean, I'm only doing what I'm doing because I have been through all those hardships already. You know, I'm not there anymore, and I'm just here to make people better and recommend people. Like Laura, I recommended you to somebody, one of my clients, because she lives near to you. Or Martina, I put always on Twitter, oh, if you want Bowen, do with Martina. Or, you know, I always recommend people, left, right, and center. You don't know this because I don't tell you all the time, but, and I'm thinking, and today somebody said to me, oh, I don't want non-hierarchy. I don't want, so she wants competition. She wants hierarchy. She doesn't want peace. And I said, okay, cool.
Okay.
You know, I don't have a problem with that. It's your choice. You know.
Thank you,
so
Andrea.
It's like,
can I just interrupt a minute
wow.
more?
It's interesting, huh?
Is
Laura?
Sorry, it's just somebody's trying to get on Zoom. Martina, has Martina got on yet?
She is, yes, Ditina.
I gave her the ID. She couldn't earlier.
I see here she's saying yes. All right, maybe she
I was.
Are you there,
I'm here.
Ditina? Okay.
Everyone's on.
Sorry, I've just picked up your message, Ditina, sorry.
Okay, I just want to, Dawn, I think Dawn put up a message there about trauma in infants.
Yes.
I've just gone now, but I saw it coming up there at some stage when somebody was talking.
So what I wanted to say with the space, I had a client and I knew that she had issues. I said nothing to her because I do psychic surgeries, and I said nothing. And up until the 6th session, I said, hi, good evening. What would you like to speak about? And I was waited for 15 minutes. It was silence. And then she revealed 3 counts of rape. And that's when we got to work.
All right. Thank you, Andrea, for
you know
all
what
your
I mean?
contributions.
So this is what
I
this
do,
is an
yes,
example
yes,
of, you know.
Yes,
this
thank
is
you
an
very
example.
much.
And then when Laura said earlier with the body that, you know, like people don't want me to speak. Why? You know, like they have, and I got really emotional when Laura and you were talking. And I think, oh, okay. you know, but I keep going. I stand tall. I keep going, and I stand in my potency.
Well,
Nobody
all I
can
can
take it.
say, all I can say to you, Andrea, is that it certainly hasn't stopped you. So thank
my
you for
best.
that. Thank you for your contributions. And
maybe,
now
you know, sometimes
I'm going to have to stop you now, Andrea, if you don't mind. And I'm going to just check. Thank you for your contributions. And I'm going to check in with Dawn if she's still there, and if she wants to say anything about the trauma that has been noticed sometimes in infants, because that is quite true. Dawn, if you want to talk about that.
You know, I do remember. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Oh, cool. So, you know, I just, this was maybe 2 years ago when I first found, I can't remember this moment what led me to the Vegas, but it was, I was having incidences of freeze, you know.
Yes.
And I
That's
hadn't
very
had,
infant. Yeah.
right. So, and that is what I think opened the door for me to see the Vegas and, you know, to begin to feel like, what is this, you know? And like, I felt like a reptile go to the bottom of the, you know, and die, you know, hold my breath and die. And so that was really fascinating. And I began studying him, Stephen Porges, because he was talking over and over and over again about how he, I think it was 1991, that's the date that comes. But if we were to Google him, you would see, you know, 3 YouTube videos come up, and every one of them will be about that subject and how he first started noticing, I think it was sudden infant death or something, where he first started to realize what was happening. And you know, and then I linked that to me, to my own life, and oh man, it's just, and then I got one of his associates who worked with him, her book, and she's a therapist, and she began using the Vegas in therapy with therapists, you know, training therapists to use the Vegas and exercise.
That's what the squeezing is about that I was talking about
to
Dawn. And that's actually the use of that,
Yes, that's so beautiful.
Yes.
I mean, just the breathing. It seems so
the
simple, but
squeezing and the releasing and the breathing,
It's so, you know, it goes so deep to, you know, the fetus heart in the mother's womb. It goes right to the core of our, you know, the beginnings of us. Coming here, and it just, I just love his work, and I love the Vegas, and I love Martina for having that. I just love that one, Martina. I use that all the time. That's my favorite one.
Yes, the Vegas.
I love it. I'm a real Vegas nerve person, and when I heard you guys talking about it, I went, I'm in the right place.
Well, you know, it is related to almost everything. I mean,
oh my God,
it's with the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And I'm just thinking, as you're speaking there, Dawn, I did a course one time with Dr. Zuletta. She actually works as a doctor. I don't know if you wouldn't know her, I'm sure, in a hospital there in London, but she works with infants. And she actually had got permission from the parents to video the infants and to video the different reactions of the infants when they were born, to the parent feeding them, being attentive, looking at them, looking into their eyes, stroking them, or what happened when the parent was feeding them but looking away, looking out the window. As you know, some mothers will have that with postnatal depression. Some mothers will have that with just a busy life. We've all had it. But it was so interesting to see what happened to the child and how the baby learned after a few episodes that they no longer looked for that. They no longer looked for the attention if it wasn't there. They just didn't look. Now, it was really hard to watch it happening to a baby, but it's real. You know, this is what happens.
It is so real, yeah.
Yes, and this is when we first encounter it, really, which is, I suppose, one of the existential, painful existences, isn't it, that we have? You know, it's part of our,
It's like we're all traumatized, right?
We are. Well, we are actually. We are, because that's the existence. But but not always to the same level, you know. I mean, there is different levels then, and it depends on what happens, I suppose, in our lives as well. You know, the different things that we may have set up. Andrew was talking about this too, with the addiction, and how we can have set up different people that we're going to meet. You may meet somebody in your life at some different stages where they will hear you and listen to you, and all of that has a healing effect. So
exactly. And I often feel, I think especially since I met Andrew, is that everything, you know, is a gift. Everything is a gift. Everything, you know, it just is. And, you know, everything opens a door for me if I'm willing to meet it.
Yes. Yes.
To just, it's okay. I use this a lot when I work with people too. I would say, is that okay? You know, they tell something horrible and I say, well, and I feel like, is that okay? No, that's not okay. Well, then that's where we are. You know, we're in resistance to that.
Yes.
And, but when it becomes okay, when I would fall on the floor and I just say, this is it, you're in it, babe. This is the bottom of the barrel. And I'm just going to be there. That's it. I'm just there.
Yes. And sometimes we need to stay there for a little while.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, I think when people are rushed out of it, and too, I was listening to Andrew talking about the forced, you know, kind of forced recovery, kind of almost from the addictions. It just doesn't work, because there has to be a place where the person reaches in themselves where they've kind of had enough of the addiction, of whatever the trauma is doing to them in their lives. I see Sean here has put up something about how the experience, that it doesn't normally get released, but the experience is what gets released. And I agree with that, yes. The memory, of course, is always there, Sean. It's just the actual traumatized memory of it limiting you is what gets released. That gets released by you going into it. We'll say even just through the vagus nerve exercises, just the tightening and the squeezing and the releasing and the breathing, that can help it be released. But I'm talking now of trauma that isn't, you know, very problematic, that we would all have. I mean, obviously for bigger traumas, it would take a bigger exercise, you know, and it would take maybe more healing, maybe more treatment. CST, definitely, Laura, would be good for that, you know. But anyway, Dawn, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that.
Can I say,
yes?
I'd like to say something to that. One of the modalities I used a lot for trauma release is called timeline therapy. And timeline therapy is a therapy where you guide the client, the person, along the timeline, into the traumatic experience, but not into the traumatic experience. So it's not a recovered memory therapy, but you get them to that place where they can start perceiving the energy of the trauma. And then you guide them, you let them hover on top of that timeline, and then, you know, you take them slightly closer in. But it is actually an imaginary process. So you're not necessarily going into that particular trauma that has actually caused. Now, and as you then find your learnings, if you wish, and you discuss, you ask certain questions and you discuss it, what happens is that the memory of the trauma, which is never the true memory anyway, it's just how they remembered it. The memory as such might still remains. The electromagnetic imprinting is being released.
Right. Okay.
It's the energy that we are releasing from that traumatic experience, and people might well still, you know, remember that they have been abused and how it worked.
Oh yes.
And recall from that, but the charge and polarity is taken away through the way either counseling or timeline therapy, whatever.
Yes.
You use.
So it's like an observer process, Martina.
It's an observer. It's a dissociated state where you're using your cognitive mind to a certain extent to find the learnings, but you're working from an imaginary process. And I've done this for a couple of years. It's very, very powerful.
Yes. Yeah, and it does work. It absolutely is very effective in how it works with the person.
Yeah, and the main thing is, it's the same with addiction. It's where people actually have to first acknowledge that they're suffering from a trauma. Yeah, a lot. I know PTSD, they actually still not acknowledging that whatever they experienced in the war has actually messed them up to the extent that certain things are not working.
Yeah.
They just want to go into distraction. And
sometimes they can't remember it, I think, Martina. They actually can't
well,
remember what it is.
they can't remember it, yes, they can't remember it, you're right. But also there is a mechanism that doesn't allow them. They just don't want to remember.
Oh, absolutely. They're terrified. They're terrified to remember. That's the problem. This is why they start making lists, because they can remember nothing. They get so absorbed in that, blocking it out. It's an unconscious thing. It's not a conscious. Yeah.
And as such, they're also not willing to look at it that they have created it in the first place. You know, it was a choice. And of course, a very tricky way of saying you have created your own trauma. But we all know that we are creating it all. And that level of awareness, you know, and obviously it's a no-go when you meet somebody for the first time. But just anyone who is a therapist here to know, when you do have a client like that and you can already perceive that that person's not willing to even acknowledge it, you probably don't make yourself wrong for not getting the results that you think you could get, because the person cannot receive what is actually required.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But they do receive on levels.
Well, it's the
dimension they receive. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's actually the opposite of receive. It's not the opposite. It's a distorted receiving. It's a forced receiving. They received so much crap, so much. They've been exposed to so much that they actually not process. It's an over receiving, forced receiving, and it's impossible then for them until they get ready. And that's where the addiction often comes in, which then allows them to really go deep down, for them to just open up.
Exactly. And the addiction sometimes can provide a break for them. It can provide a happy space where they can actually be free of all that trauma and all that they aren't really even aware of, that they don't know what it is that's making them so unhappy. So the addiction takes them out of it. And in that space, they can actually find healing. It can come through the addiction, as we have seen.
So that's why not every addiction, as far as I'm concerned, I try to put that positive spin on it. The reason why we're doing it.
Yes.
You know, there's a way of getting out of it. Takes you out of existence, because you can't the existence. You're judging yourself so much for what happened, you're judging others so much for what happened, that there's just no ways you can make peace with that until you start releasing those traumatic experiences.
Yes.
I wanted to share something with you guys. So I was told many years ago that I was abused as a child by a woman I was working with, and it felt, you know, like, wow, this is great. I got something to work with, you know. I felt kind of excited about it. And that was probably 40 years ago or something. You know, yeah, right. I was excited. But I thought, wow, I got something to dig into. But it stuck with me for so long. I did so much inner work on the inner child. You know, I did that whole inner child thing for many years. It seemed like almost, so anyway, so June, I speak with Andrew in a session, and he says, why don't you do this? Do hypnosis and go back there, you know? And well, I've tried so many times. I've been back there. Oh, at least 1,000. I know the stairway, I know everything. I know that space so well. I go in, I can breathe the air in the room, I'm there. I can't tell what happened. And when I did the hypnosis, I found out that it was an agreement between my soul and his. I came to help my uncle. I made that agreement. And I healed it myself by exactly what you guys are telling me right now, what you're telling all of us. That's how it got healed. Just what you said, Martina, about coming up over and looking. I was there so many times, floating up over that little girl and just looking at her. You know, I could sense her. I could feel, smell, taste, everything. I was there in the clothes. And, you know, it feels like what I needed to know is, yes, it did happen. And that's all I needed to know.
And Dawn, what you're saying is actually what we, you know, there is a time when the time is
right to do that. You
literally can't push that.
I know. I really tried to push it. I did. Yeah. And this is like that A+ thing, right? I was going to be fucking A+ on this thing. And I was going to break down the fucking door and I'm cleaning this shit up. And, you know, it just wasn't going to happen. So it was going to happen. That's all there is. Yeah. But it did happen. And it did feel like it is not in my consciousness. It isn't there. That's why I couldn't see it. It was already healed.
Yeah.
I healed it.
Yes.
You know, by doing what you guys are saying. So I just wanted to share that because I feel all of us can do that.
Yes, and we are doing it,
We're doing it
in different ways. Again, unconsciously a lot of the time, I think, Dawn. I think we do so much actually in unknowingness.
Oh, that's so sweet to say that. You know, I love that because lately I feel like every night I get in bed, my mind makes lists of things I got to do. Well, long list. And I'll just say, please, could we just and come into the heart?
Yes.
Because during the day, you know, I feel like I can do a few things. I have to, you know, make a phone call and do this and that. But could I just let spirit lead me from my heart today? And just sit in this calm, silent joy, you know? It's just so beautiful like that. Without this, you know, demand to, break through, you know, whatever it is.
Yes, and that's your window of tolerance.
Oh,
where you can sit in peace like that, and with all of the traumas.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes. Oh,
yes.
Mary, I love that. Thank you for that.
Okay.
And that is so
thank you, Dawn. Sorry, Laura.
Well, thank you, Dawn, for sharing. That really is beautiful.
It is.
I notice, you know, talking about that, doing the heart work, it's something I've incorporated much more lately into my CST. When the client is on the table, the first thing I do is bring the left and right lobes of the brain to the heart and the residual image of the face to the heart, so we get them in their I am presence before I even start, particularly with quite traumatic cases. And then the amount of peace it seems to give them just by doing that. First off, I don't talk through my treatments, but that when I first start and I get people to feel supported by the couch, to feel loved, all the things Mary was saying about that, I've included now that heart work, and then later move to the intestines and so on. I mean, you can work so much with interweaving the modalities, all the different, you know, the modalities we work with. We can just start interweaving them now, can't we?
Yes.
Everything we've learned, all our experiences, you know, because there is huge amount of collective trauma that has to be healed, because all this uncollective trauma, all this collective trauma in the world must be shaping our world.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so
it's shaping how we behave and how we relate to one another. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's isn't it? I mean, trauma is the thing that we're healing, really, isn't it? And all the offshoots of trauma.
Yes. Somebody is asking there, can they ask about CST?
Sure.
I had a first session last week. Casey, I think, is asking that. Do you want to speak, Casey?
Do you want me to read the question?
Yeah, please, Martina.
So Casey's asking, I can read the questions if you want, asking about CST a little bit. I had my first session last week and the practitioner began to speak about her own issues and relationships. Sack her and go to Laura Massey.
Yes, that's it. We needn't read any further after.
No.
Yes.
I'm not sure about the implications of that upon my process.
Marking up the problem is that's it. That's all.
Laura, what do you say to that?
I say, well, thank you for recommending me. Might be a long way from there, but I was taught, and I'm still being taught, I'm only a student, so I work with everybody just where they're at. So I don't speak a lot. I mean, Lynn knows. Lynn, you have CST from me regularly. Do you want to speak about it? I do the heart work in the beginning, yes, and then we're fairly quiet, aren't we, through the session?
Yeah, I think occasionally we say a few things, but very often we don't, do we? It's just very relaxing. But I found it very helpful. But you've never talked about your own issues or anything like that to me.
Not during a session, anyway.
No, not during a session.
Maybe with a glass of wine.
I think generally speaking, though, like Casey's question and all of you that are talking there, like it is a rule of thumb as a practitioner that you don't really bring in your own issues and your own stuff, because it is about the person that's in there with you, and it's about you attending them and facilitating them. So Casey, you might need to think about that one.
Well, and Casey, another thing, there is sometimes where I remember using my own examples to explain something to the clients that I didn't want to address.
Yes.
Yeah, so there is that, but it doesn't really matter. Casey, the question you just gotta, how did it feel for you? Because so often you lie on that couch, and I think Alan said it. Healer needs to be healed. So many times we as the clients heal the therapist.
Yes.
Yeah. So just ask yourself the question: how does it feel? Can you have a conversation with this lady and say, look, next time I come, can you please not talk to me because it just makes something up, don't tell her that it irritates you or something, but it doesn't actually work for me, whatever that. And if she goes funky on you, then say thank you very much. Just an awareness.
Yeah. I mean, with Laura, the whole time it's directed at me. It's on the client, and I can react in any way. I feel totally safe, and Laura's present there for me and puts me right into my body so I can feel what's going on. There's no distraction at all.
Yeah,
I can't even see that they would have an agenda of triggering, because not how you talk. And there might be some instances in other healing modalities. I can't think of one where you might want to trigger something to get something out, but certainly not with CST. It's all about meeting the client exactly where they're at, and it's a very very simple, soothing modality. So I can't see how that will be applicable. But there you go. You learn from it, don't you?
And maybe that the lesson in it, Casey, is for you to actually claim your own space and your own power. And maybe that you can do that by saying, look, I know you're trying to help, but I'd really rather if the focus was on me. You're paying for your session, so why not?
Yeah.
And another question that comes up for me is that, I don't know what you do, Casey, but is that like a little trigger for you to look at? Do you have capacities along those lines to help people through a therapy? I don't know if you are a therapist or not. Look at it in perspective, because that's always a funny thing of doing is, okay, so what's going on here? So how can I use this to my advantage? What's in there for me?
Getting out of judgment. Yeah,
she's saying that's Dawn was saying that, how she had that happen too. Yes, I suppose the fact that she's asking the question sort of indicates that she's not too happy with it, though. You know, the fact that she would ask the question, I think, might indicate that she needs to have time focused on her. And you know, all of what we said was all helpful, I'm sure, in some way, in arriving at that space.
Cool.
So, does anybody else, Laura, did you want to talk about your client? I know you started with that, but I don't know if you wanted to talk about what was coming up for your client. Does anybody else have anything else they want to talk about?
Well, yeah, I've talked a lot. There's some stuff going on in the chat. If there are questions, if people want to share them.
Yes, if there are questions, yes. I'm trying to look. They're moving up so fast. You see, when I'm talking, I miss them.
I think we have actually covered most of them.
Yes.
And
Dawn
if not,
said she had that happen too.
just please repeat them. Remind me of the subject. We're talking PTSD, right?
Trauma and PTSD.
PTSD.
Okay. I have just something that I've witnessed
Mm-hmm.
that so choices, too many choices for the client or the participant within the trauma can cause more trauma. I've really seen this a lot. So let's say it's me as the therapist, and I said to my client, oh, you could exercise, your food, your diet, you could get body work, do revocations, work on your breathing, let's do talk therapy. I mean, if I were to say all these options to this individual, whoa, there's that freeze response, which in turn creates more guilt, shame, and blame within the client. So it is also our responsibility to be responsible for them and not just give them choices and guide them towards wherever they would like to be. And so if it is a block within them to create that choice, then we need to work on that choice itself and not focus on the trauma. Like going in, so a backdoor approach.
Yes.
Or,
yes.
oh, hi, just come in and sit on the table and let's see where we go. But not, you know what I mean? Just overloading them with all this.
Yes, I totally know what you mean. I think that's key to working with the Ditina, no matter what the modality. It's almost like I'm working with this, but I'm not really going to talk about it as yet. So you let the person just come in and say what they want to say and see where it goes. Because even, you know, focusing on it, even the word could be hard for people to hear and frightening, actually, for some.
Exactly. Yeah, I think I just saw somebody say dump. Yeah, so us as the practitioners, we need to be really mindful of that, you know, information dump or choice dump for the people, or even within ourselves, because we do, like, we know all these options and we're like, oh, I know how to self-heal. Where do I start today?
Yes, and I know what that is. I know exactly now what that is. You know, that feeling that comes up. And I see here that Sarah is talking about boundaries, and it's very apt that has popped up, because that's what you're talking actually about too, Ditina. You know, just watching that boundary, watching that you don't fudge that with somebody that you're working with, that you can hold your own boundary quietly and silently and just be available.
And not give too many choices to the client.
No.
And not I don't talk about the trauma per se. I don't mention, don't even use the word trauma. I just get on and do the work that they've come to me for. Because it's not an energy I want to bring in. I want to create that energy with the heart space, awareness.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes I think it's considered, Laura, better to wait for the person to name it, as in to say, you know, that was trauma, that was abuse, rather than you naming it for them, because sometimes it could be seen or felt as if you were leading them. When they arrive at it themselves, it's often better.
Yeah, and the work I've had done, because obviously I also go for CST treatment. So I've been to people who are fully qualified, who do the removal of energetic cysts, where often trauma is held. Wow. And even then, the work is that they ask you to describe. They don't put anything on you. There's not really any choices, you know. It's just, can you describe how this feels? Which is work I've already started to do sort of experimentally. Can you describe this feeling and what do you think it relates to? But you're not necessarily asking them to relive the trauma.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes they can actually give very vivid descriptions of the shape, the size, the color.
Yeah.
If it's moving, what would it say if it had a voice? You can do a lot of work with the visualization actually, and it works really well because there's a little bit of a disassociation with it, even though they're connecting with it. You know, it's still not head on. I'm wondering, Andrea, if you have experience of removing any energy blocks in your work, because I know you do some kind of psychic healing, don't you?
I do psychic, so I was trained in that. I do it with anybody. I don't have to see you. I don't have to be there. With alchemy, when somebody comes to me, you know, when I do face to face, I don't have to know anything. This just wanted to remind you that there was a question that the lady asked, who is in charge of the session, the healer or the client or both? Lana just asked. So for me, it's important the client is comfortable, but also you have to be comfortable. So it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street.
Yes.
But when I have a client on the table, I just ask the body and the body tells me. I ask the body and the body tells me. And I ask them, would you like me to say anything if anything comes up? And if they say no, I stay quiet. If they say yes, I don't start chattering, but sometimes maybe at the end, just, you know, because they are really deep in there. But with the psychic surgery, what I do is, if things come up in me, I ask the person, can I remove this? You know, not with that, don't just go in. They say yes, so I do it. I don't know how I do it. I can't really describe this.
It doesn't matter. You do it and you feel that you do it. Yeah, and that's.
But what I wanted to tell you a really good example that, you know, Mary, when you were talking about that with disassociate, and Martin was talking about the vagus nerve.
Yes.
So when you experience a trauma, let's say you were sexually abused or someone was sexually abused, I think Martin, we talked about this before, that you're not in your body, right? You're not, you disassociate with the body. So what happens is when you are a child and this happens to you, you can switch that off. So it's like you switch that off, and then maybe when you are 40 years old or 25 years old or whatever, suddenly it hits you that this happened to you.
Yes.
And then when Laura was saying that you can describe, or you were saying just earlier that if you asked your client, can you please describe this to me? They would straight away, they knew it because they kind of disassociated, but they would be able to go back to that moment saying, this happened to me. And that's when the trauma kicks in.
Yes.
You know, that's when you just, wow, this happened to me. And
I know.
A lot of people going,
yes.
And people don't like to come out with it because now they say, oh, you are lying, or they blame the person.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
So it's a conflict.
Yeah, it is. Yes. Thank you, Andrea. I just see a question here that I want to look at. It's from Petruska. She says, how do you deal with patients after a session if you see the session was intense? And Casey said that was a good question. I'm not sure actually what you're asking. How do you deal with patients? Do you want to say something on that, Petruska? Are you there?
Yes. When usually you have another patient, you know, and that person has, you know, a big integration. Why you doing that? How you deal with that?
So you're saying when you have another person just after the person you've worked with, is that what you're saying?
You already book other session, you know, you have in the middle time, you wait, you're expecting the next patient to come, and the person you just finished has a very intense, very, very intense experience.
And you're wondering, as a therapist, how do you deal with that?
Yes, please.
Okay, that is actually,
Grounding.
so that's a good question, because really the therapist has to look after themselves, because you have to get out of the room, you have to get out of the space where the session took place, go out for a walk in the fresh air, you know, do the thing of, excuse me, just shaking your hands, shaking your legs, shaking off the energy, just doing a quick rub down on yourself. And if you have time, you know, have something to eat. That's very good to ground you, to eat something or have a warm drink. Because usually with what I do, I would, in the center where I work, I'd only have 15 minutes break. If it's at home, I can have a longer break. But, you know, that could lead into the whole area of vicarious trauma, which is where the therapist actually takes on the traumas that she has worked with or he has during the day, and it can become a problem for the therapist. So it is, yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that we all need to watch for and pay attention to.
I spray, Mary. I've got a alcohol spray.
Yes,
so I
yes.
spray. Sometimes I've had sort of only 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes between.
Do you move, Laura? Do you move?
I move. Yeah. So what I do is that I will first of all bring all the energies to zero balance at the end of any treatment I've done. So all energy is now at zero balance. So you've got nothing hanging over. Then I focus on the other sorts of hygiene. So you can't always sage, because people don't always like sage, which is obviously the ideal.
But you can open windows, let the fresh air in. But it's really important to move. The therapist needs to move out of the space, because otherwise you're just like the sitting duck. You know, you're waiting there for the next one and the next one. So you have to move out, literally walking out and walking down the corridor, going to the bathroom, whatever it is, washing your hands, back up. That's really important. That movement piece is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we also have the energetic component of the blending. What if there was a benefit of that leftover energy that the new client is also going to be connected to? Like, we have to be a little mindful of that. You know, there's this greater force and energy, and maybe the two clients that just met, they had similar issues, and within that dumping process, both of them are having an opportunity to heal, and we're just the catalyst and the observer for that. You know, if we're so busy trying to clean and come up with these ways to say what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, it just, I think, it's just a possibility that it can also
I just
bring
want
a
to
block.
say to that, Tina, that the memory of it is with you anyway. Like Martina was talking earlier about, you know, when you actually work on traumas, you don't get rid of the memory of it, you just get rid of the polarity of the experience. And that's what you're trying to get rid of as the therapist. You are going to remember the memory of what the other therapist or the other client shared with you, and you do hold on to that. You absolutely do. And it can be beneficial to the other, but you don't want to mix the energies. That's what we're talking about with the getting out of the room and just, you know, sort of clearing yourself of that space.
Mary.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
So I was just about to jump in.
Oh,
Am I a bit echoey?
I didn't know you were there at all.
Oh yes, I mean, my house is absolutely destroyed, so I can't be on camera. Absolutely. No, see, I wanted to chime in here, because with my experience as well, you see, you're blending the idea of not overwhelming the client, and then also, you know, the spiritual hygiene and the processes behind how far a healer should actually go within their own process. And I found actually a lot of the times when you get someone who is resilient to the things you have to say and the things you have to offer, that's actually an entity attachment. And they go hand in hand with this kind of thing. So I find that if the healer has overwhelmed the client, then the healer has most definitely overstepped the mark and possibly stepped on their journey. You know, and the healer, as a part of their own journey, must always detach anyway once it's done, no matter what happens. And I personally find more instances of, I'll give an example. I was asked to work with a young man who was a heroin addict, and he had been gang raped by a bunch of men. And so I went to meet this guy, and it was a very sorry state that I was met with. And every time I spoke, he spoke over the top of me. Every time I tried to initiate anything, he would block me instantly, you know, and I could see that he had so little sovereignty, that these were entities using internal programs to you know, avoid any form of healing. Yes. And that's something that I come across quite often, more than overloading people or giving them too much. I find that generally people aren't able to assimilate because of all of the external stimuli that's connected to their traumas and hauntings as well, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely, Matty. I totally agree with you. And I think when you're working with traumas like that, you are working a lot of the time with entities, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the time, that's who you're talking to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And you can tell when you're talking to them, can't you?
Yeah.
I mean,
because they don't see sense and, sorry.
Yes.
No, go on, Matty.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because they don't see sense, and you know, you can see when somebody's sabotaging themselves. You know, I find generally over talking is more of a sign than not saying enough, but that's just in my own personal process.
That's more of a sign of entities, is it, Matty?
Yes, I've just seen that in my own observations.
Repetitiveness. Talking very fast. Now, I'm not saying everyone who talks fast has entities. Don't get me wrong, but just on people with PTSD and things like that, that is what I noticed. The repeating something I've already been told, obsessiveness, as Martina brought up earlier, the OCD side of it, the not listening, which I think is what Matty's just said, the ungroundedness, the not being present. And another thing I notice is the clumsiness, the walking into furniture and things like that. And the denial, absolutely the denial, not wanting to take on board anything you're doing. And this brings us quite nicely, Matty, onto, I like it that you've expanded this now, because now it's starting to feel like we do other work as healers in other realms. And I myself dealt with people, and I remember going in my dream time to collect soul shards for them, because they had been, you know, just not blown apart, but they had been they had lost soul shards through extreme trauma of war, through, you know, PTSD, but just the war especially. So I've now had 2 clients who have been in body parts and things flying around and in war scenarios. And I do remember going in my dream time to help them with soul shards. So I love that aspect of the work as well, because that can't be treading on their journey, because that's your higher self doing work in dream time, you know. And I'm sure we all do it. It's just whether we can remember it or not. I mean, our work just goes on and on, doesn't it? As healers, you know, as we facilitate.
Well, everything begins in the dream world, and then once it begins in the dream world, it manifests in the waking world, you know. So you know, it's about how much potency do you have to bring back those memories anyway. So really, you know, and this is what was being asked earlier on, is the truth is that who's initiating the process? Well, obviously it's an equal co-creation. One person has to have enough belief and enough effort behind them to allow the healer to facilitate the mediumship of whatever it is that's required for the healing to take place. It's equal effort on both parties.
Yes, I agree.
And that continues in the dream world.
Yes, and the healer has to be able to accommodate the client so that they can do that. They can, you know, expand and explore. So it is equal co-creation. Yes.
I'd like to say something to that as well, in terms of responsibilities as a healer, is to stay in your level of awareness and actually ask yourself the question, is this client a client? It's just as much your responsibility as theirs. And you will, in the beginning, Yeah, later on, once you are established yourself and you've got your boundaries all fortified and everything, you will start attracting a different type of clientele. But you can still, you know, always get the odd one in. And ask yourself, is it a kindness to raise certain subjects, you know, with that client? Is he able to actually hear me if I do that? And reminding yourself that that kindness is equally a retribution towards you, because if you start initiating certain subject matters with the client, and he or she is not willing to understand or get it, then actually you're hurting yourself, because they will turn it round and it becomes a backstabbing exercise.
Yes.
Yes.
And you open yourself up to any entities or any sorts of programs that person has.
Just because they come, just because they pay, it doesn't really mean they want to have a healing. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
It could be an attack.
Yes.
It could be an attack. And you know what? There's a good way of when a client is on the phone and says, look, I've been to so many people and nobody can help me. Wow.
Yeah.
Red light. Okay.
Yeah, red heaven.
And then you either say, look, you just either, you know, trust your intuition, trust your knowingness. Shall I really get myself into this, or, you know, do whatever it takes to get rid of them? Because
get the garlic out.
Seriously, you're not doing yourself a favor.
Yeah.
And you'll get, after a certain level of feelings, you start to recognize that.
I know. So sometimes it's good, I think, to have a session where you kind of introduce it as a session where you're going to find out if it would be okay with both of you to work together, if you're suited to work together. And that leaves an opening for the therapist if they decide, well, you know.
And be honest, you know,
absolutely.
I always say to people who want to come for empowerment sessions, I say, look, let's have a chat, 10, 20 minutes. You don't have to pay for that. I'm intense. You might not like it. See if you like me. I'll see if I like you, and then we'll get on with it. And then we'll do something. Just be honest, you know. When you do talking stuff, and do physical therapy is a different story anyway. And to be honest, as far as I'm concerned, as a healer or therapist, you should never entangle in the first place.
Yeah.
You have to have your boundaries so set up that it doesn't matter what they come up with. Remind yourself, you've done it, you've been there, maybe not in this lifetime, but in any others. Be aware, even if the guy's riddled with entities, it doesn't matter.
No,
because
absolutely.
You know what? You are the alpha entity in all of that. Yeah,
exactly.
You have the potency.
I'm never shocked.
Yes.
You just need to know not to entangle. Yeah. And sometimes with entities, you know what it's like. You have to be a bit more intense when somebody starts, and you know it's talking stuff. I am not having this conversation right now. Thank you. And you carry on. Yeah. So use your energy, use your signature frequency. You know, you can do so much by not even saying anything.
Absolutely. I see Sarah has put up there that she has found that sometimes she has got entangled and she felt drained and exhausted. And that is so true. And that's such a learning, I think, Sarah. And I think we've all had experiences like that. It is a learning when you walk into that. Yeah, it teaches us. Yeah, it does.
I just had a client, no, it wasn't a client. It was actually somebody who came. I walked away from that table. We were eating something together, and all of a sudden I had a huge cold thing going through me.
Ooh, yeah.
And I started feeling really nauseous afterwards. I thought, what is that? And it was basically a ghost that just went straight through me, you know?
Yeah, trying to inhibit you.
Yeah, it was just because I wasn't aware enough. I wasn't thinking.
But Mark, no,
so, you know.
That's a cheeky bastard.
I like what Sarah just put up about the savior complex.
Yeah.
Yes. We don't go in. You're absolutely right. We don't go. We're not martyring ourselves. We're not in there. We're facilitating them to heal. Absolutely.
If you keep getting trouble, then you need to have a word with your precognitive workforce. That's for sure. If you keep having to learn the same lesson over and over and over again, something's not right. You're out of balance.
Yeah.
So
go on.
No, I was just wondering if we want to go back to PTSD and say a few more things on that.
Yes, we could. The only thing I need to say is that I have to go in a few minutes, and I'm sorry about that.
How are we doing? It's already 6:20. Okay, no. Well,
yeah. Well, no, but you, Laura, can continue it on, Martina. I just have an appointment that I have to go for, and I have to go now in a few minutes. So, sorry, but you can.
Okay, no worries. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you for your input, Mary. It's good.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Mary.
Yes, great stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to leave you actually now before you go
Yeah,
on to something new, and I'll catch up with you next week.
Okay, Mary. Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay,
Thank you so much. It was great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Martina, what I wanted to add is that, and to Laura, is that I don't know how you work, guys, but I think, Martina, you know this already, the way I work, that when you have a session, for me, I always detach, I clear before. But when you have a client, I have people here who actually help me. I don't know if any of you guys work like that, but I have my guides, I have my people around me, so I don't have to be worried about anything because they are here and they tell me what. And they you know, they're not just here to help me, but the client, but you know, I have my team. And I'm sure you do, Martina, as well. And Laura, I don't know if you work like this or the other Christina or the other ladies, but you know, it is.
Yeah,
for me,
and
so
sometimes your team is out on the piss or something, and you
no,
replace them with somebody else, and all of a sudden, whoosh!
I
always make sure they're right there.
I always have a backup. It's true, huh?
The room's always overcrowded. Always.
It's always overcrowded. Always overcrowded. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. Well, Laura, I don't know if you want to finish it off. How are you guys doing? What you want to, is there anything more you want to talk about? I mean, in particular with PTSD and with trauma?
Well, I have a story about PTSD. Not much of, it's just really a story, but it just shows how it can facilitate in the body. I had a friend who was a sniper in the special forces, and he went out onto patrol one day, and he had mounted his what do they call it now, bayonet on the opposite side to what he usually does. He was at the rear of a patrol, and the patrol was ambushed by one man from the rear without any weapons at all. He just grabbed this guy Rob, pulled him to the ground, and Rob had to remove his bayonet and kill this geezer with him on top of him. I mean, you can imagine what that must have been like, you know, that just the blood and everything that, you know, it was traumatic. And he had nightmares about that pretty much nightly for decades, to the point where eventually, last time I saw him, he was in a wheelchair. And what happened is eventually it'd make clots within his blood that were going through his heart and giving him brain damage. It's absolutely shocking. You know, and he was quite a positive guy. He was a friendly guy, but just this one trauma, and he just could not get it out of his body, and it was repetitive to the point where I would imagine he's probably passed away by now. But that's just extreme levels that trauma and stress can manifest within the body. Extreme.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, they can be helped, can't they? Much earlier on, they can be helped with the nightmares. All the spiritual hygiene practices that we've talked about many times, all the saging the house while the person's on the table, their house. If you can do it in their house, this is a tip I got from Andrew, while they're actually on the table and very peaceful, go and sage their house, he said, because that will give them huge healing. So because what you're dealing with in that mat is the entities, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much involved in that. You know, there's so much involved. There's a very expansive subject. You know, the whole thing around it. There's so much that goes on there. For me, it was just one of those things where I just thought, wow, look how much that's manifested within the body. How destructive.
Yeah. But you know, and this is the thing. You know, I liken PTSD very much with to addictions. And at the end of the day, I mean, we're talking amongst us here, it is a choice. And it's almost like shutting the body down, literally, it's suicide, okay? It's suicide. Because with the PTSD, with the forced receiving, with all the judgment that comes with it, the judgment of the self, the judgment of the others, they just lose themselves in the victim role and can no longer get out of that. And, you know, it is most of the time that if they really succumb to it, it is already partly, well, like everything, it's contracted out in the fetus of the womb. Yeah.
Exactly.
If they're going, then that's their way of getting out of this reality. And if they're choosing to change it, they can change it. And how can they change it is first they need to acknowledge it. Yeah. Most PTSD people don't even acknowledge it.
Yeah,
that's right. It's complete avoidance, and people around those people tend to avoid subjects as well. Everybody's just trying to avoid it.
Yeah.
I remember with that one particular guy, we were having a staff meeting because I worked at a warehouse with this chap. And we were having a staff meeting. There's just a couple of us there, and I remember him saying, oh, maybe this is retribution for all the people I've killed. And everyone went, no, 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 no. And I went, well, it fucking could be. You know, who knows? You know, who knows? It bloody could be. So, you know, most people are just trying to avoid these things. You know, it's too sensitive, or we mustn't upset people. But sometimes, you know, what's required is uncomfortable. You know, but people, they don't like discomfort in this modern society.
I mean, this is like opening a can of worms.
Yeah,
it's like it's really, really tough work to do that. And what I'm also finding is that, talking about the body again, sometimes the trauma is so well hidden. Because, you know, you get some caliber bodies, they have, you know, the body we know, the technology is just amazing. Yeah. They can really hide so much in the muscles. So very often when you get a body, when you do massage or with a Bowen or with CST, I don't know, probably too, you also touch, and you feel the muscles really, really, really tight. Those are the guys very often that they hold a lot of trauma in their muscles, a lot of memories that they don't want to remember.
Absolutely. And also in the fascia.
In the fascia and everything.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, the fascia.
Where it's,
fascia work, massage.
Yeah.
You know, when somebody like that comes to you, you know already you can't talk to them because there's no way they can hear what you got to say. And also, you know, sovereignty doesn't stop. We're not stepping on other people's sovereignty. No. We can't step on our own sovereignty. We can't just shut up and listen and taking on everything they're saying, knowing it's crap. Yeah. You also got to work both. It goes both ways, right? That's why I always say, know who is your client, because you don't want to sit there just for the sake of whatever you're charging. It's not worth it to listen to all of that, knowing that there is actually a solution to all of that. But
I wouldn't take money from someone who didn't listen to the things I had to say or acted upon it. You know, if I knew that somebody had just completely ignored any of the things that we talked about,
darling, if he comes,
then what's the point?
If they come,
yeah,
you're charging for your hour, yeah. You must,
absolutely.
You must still get paid for that. You must. But what I was going to say is, get them on a couch. If you do both physical and mental and all the other stuff, I always get them on the couch first. Let's not talk, because there's nothing, you know, we can talk that actually makes sense for you at this stage. Get you on the couch and start working from the outside in, by start loosening them up. And then initially what's actually happening after 1 or 2 sessions, they start to talk to you. Yeah. Because as soon as you start relaxing those muscles and work on the fascia and whatever modality you do, it's coming out. It's coming out. And then you've already started a connection. Then you can, you know, work and give a couple of ideas and start talking to the person.
And what I really like is when people with PTSD start to actually acknowledge it, as you were saying, and you think, right, I've really got something to work with here. I get a flicker of excitement that this could got the potential, it has for everybody, of being a big journey of like a spiritual emergence. So they could be going through this to come out the other side, you know, work through it, come out the other side. And that's, if I say that's my aim from a very sacred, neutral point of view, without treading on their journey, but I can't help but sometimes pick that up from somebody, it does excite me, because if somebody is genuinely wanting to buy into their own healing and they're wanting to do the work, and they're, you know, they will, you work at their level, as you were saying, Martina, but you get the sort of, you know, enthusiasm from them that they're really wanting to do this. You know that they are out creating, not all the time, but they're out creating some of those entities at times when you've got them on the table and you're getting them to work from their heart space. And I love that, the flipping of the frequencies, so that you can see that an out creation of that is possible, and that they could then, they've already started their spiritual journey, but they could then start to create as a sort of a spiritual emergence, if you like.
Yeah,
that's so nice hearing that. Just being able to help a wide range of people on any awareness of their own journey that they are.
Yeah, because it's not all negative.
We all started somewhere. It's like the most insignificant seemingly thing at the time, and then bam, look where you end up.
Indeed, just that. That. It doesn't matter if you don't know anything, or, you know, but there's, Martina, is a question. It says, can you receive trauma from dream time and suffer from that trauma in the present body? That was the question.
Yes, and the answer is yes, absolutely.
Yes, I agree.
And the tool is colonics.
Absolutely.
Not just colonics, of course, not just colonics, but, you know, this is part of why he's drilling down on colonics all the time, because we still carry, you know, dream time crap literally in our intestines that could have been, you know, eons, you know, old.
Eons and eons and eons.
Absolutely,
And
yes.
how do you know you're being attacked in your dreams? Through your teeth.
Sorry?
How
Teeth,
do you
yes.
know you're being attacked in your dreams? Through your teeth.
The teeth. Oh, the teeth, actually, the teeth, yes?
Yeah, that's how you know you're being attacked in your dreams.
In
extreme cases, it's like crumbling.
So what I did, I have a friend who, I have a laser, I don't know what, I have a quantum wave laser, and you can program into that laser different codes. You can program a bundle, you can program loads of stuff. Anyway, so I consulted my friend, because she does a lot of stuff she has other types of lasers, and then she did put me on her laser, and I did different types of codes. It's like an AI. I became an AI. So anyway,
I think you are an alien anyway, yeah.
I put it in there, and every night since you know, when we did that thing, when we spoke about it, I do the lasering every night, and it's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, I always do the clearing, so that's not a problem. But so you acknowledge there's something there, and then, you know, I do different types of codes and different types of.
Yeah.
I'm working on a money maker code now.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. When we do money and abundance, you can tell us all about it.
No, I have abundance code that is working, but I don't want to try and create a program on my own. So Martina, you will be the guinea pig. I'll try that.
Oh God, no. Okay, guys, let me go back to the dream time quickly, because, you know, the advanced dream time revocation, that also deals with that. Yeah, to really so you don't just have to poop it out, but you can, of course. But, you know, it's really, really good to go into all those details in dream time revocation. And who wrote that? Andrew wrote it, yes. So I think we have it on the, did we not put it up? We put it up.
I think we can find that and put it up, can't we? Also, another one I thought might be quite good to put up, Martina, if you want to, related to this. Didn't you do a rage revocation or abuse revocation?
Yes.
Somewhere there's a rage revocation, I'll look it up, and you actually wrote an abuse revocation.
Yeah.
I have that somewhere.
Do me a favor, guys. If anybody wants that, let me know and I'll send it to you directly. I don't want to overload the system here with stuff, but I think that Dreamtime revocation is already on it. So go and find it and not obviously, you know.
Okay.
Another wonderful tool, Martina, that you can do, and this, I'm doing colonics at the moment. I'm in the middle of some. And one thing that I do is put the revocations into the water before you do the colonics. So actually pray over the water as well, especially the dreamtime clearing and any of those kind of clearing revocations, and they go straight into the colon.
Dreamtime clearing is very, it's very cool.
Straight away.
Yeah. I used to sleep with it under my pillow.
Yeah.
I used to just put revocation under my pillow with crystals and sleep on it. Yeah. I mean, that's all alchemy. That's a whole other.
I did that with the union and communion consciousness strike.
Yeah. But it's all fortifying your reality.
Yeah.
Establishing your boundaries, you know, showing the universe that you're ready to do the work.
Yeah.
Bring it on. Bring it on. That are ready.
Anything else as we wind up here, I think, shall we, Martina?
Yes, let's wind up.
Yeah. Anything else anybody wants to bring up?
Laura, there was a question on that came up about saying, could you say more about the teeth, how the teeth were affected?
Oh, the teeth, yes. So what do we know? What do you know about the teeth being affected through the dream time? I do know, let me just say what I know. All I know really is that if you have issues with your teeth, that is an indication that, you know, you're being targeted, or you're having dreamtime reunions with beings that don't necessarily beneficial to you.
Yeah. Don't have your best interests at heart.
Did you mean though about the crumbling, about the grinding of teeth and things like that?
Oh, and that grinding. Yeah.
And the dreams. Yeah. I used to have so many dreams where my teeth were like crumbling and I had to push them back in. I was something. I love that.
I've had that shit too.
They're sort of the antennae, aren't they? Teeth. They're like antennae to me, and I think that they pick up stuff. That's just my visualization of it. And I always go on.
They're circuit breakers, so they're related to every single meridian that's in your body.
Yeah,
the teeth are. Yeah,
they're really big echo chambers. So when an echo gets in your teeth, it really just is in there.
Okay, cool, fantastic. Yeah, no, I can't remember that. I can't remember anything else he said about teeth other than that. Oh, something sexual too, wasn't it? But everything is sexual, isn't it? Because everything is force, you know. I mean, everything is force, which is sexual creativity, you know. So yes, okay. Well,
thank you.
We're done. Lovely.
Laura, do you wanna...
That was great, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming along, and we'll see you all next week, I guess.
Bye, guys.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Happy birthday! Yeah.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday! Yes, Laura. Happy birthday!
Thank you.